The Open Public Meetings Act statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, in compliance with NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act notices this duly and regularly scheduled meeting of the Jackson Township Planning Board has been published and posted in all appropriate locations.
May I have a roll call, please?
For Monday, December 6, 2021, the Jackson Township Planning Board meeting, Mr. Dolan,
Present.
Dr. Campbell, Mr. Riker,
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Herman,
Here.
Ms. Brito, Mr. Wall,
Here.
Mr. Fleming,
Here.
Mr. Riccardi,
Here.
Mr. Herring, Mr. Hudak.
Here. Thank you. May I have a motion for the payment of voucher recording secretary for this evening, December 6th, 2021? Please. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And minutes from our November 1st, 2021 regular meeting. Is everybody okay to vote on those minutes? Anybody have any questions? No, no good? Terrence, yeah, motion, please.
Oh,
Roll call.
Who's eligible? Why don't you announce who's
yeah,
eligible? It'll be
eligible
easier.
are
Sorry.
Mr. Dolan, Mr. Riker, Ms. Brito, Mr. Wall, Mr. Fleming, Mr. Riccardi, Mr. Herring, Mr. Hudak.
Okay. Okay, may I have a roll call, please, to accept the
Um,
minutes?
I just need a new second. I'm sorry, Doctor. Yeah, a new second.
Second.
Mr. Dolan,
Yes.
Mr. Riker,
Yes.
Ms. Brito, Mr. Wall,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yeah.
Mr. Riccardi,
Yes.
Mr. Herring, Mr. Hudak.
Yes. Engineering and planning matters, gentlemen, either of you have anything for us? Thank you. Okay, legal matters. We have a few resolutions. The first one is block 4801, lot 24, Hermann Family Investments Company LLC. Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, that involves the 7 contractor warehouses on 440 North County Line Road, passed after 2 meetings and review of the board.
Anyone care to make a motion? And roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell. Yes. Mr. Riker,
Yes.
Ms. Brito, Mr. Wall,
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi,
Yes.
Mr. Herring,
Yeah.
Mr. Hudak.
Yes. Next up, we have block 12301, lot 13, BMH Property 2 LLC. Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, the board will recall this is the approval of the conversion of the previously granted use variance to permit an animal care facility to an office building. Again, after 2 meetings, the board was able to ensure that the design and facade of the building was upgraded, and this is the memorialization of same.
Thank you. Anyone care to make a motion? Second. And roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell. Yes. Mr. Riker,
Yes.
Mr. Wall,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yeah.
Mr. Riccardi,
Yes.
Mr. Herring,
Yeah.
Mr. Hudak.
Yes. And our last resolution for this evening, block 12202, lot 1, Jackson Baptist Church, Inc.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board will recall this is the approval of the minor site plan amendment to the second phase of the churches, the Baptist churches property. The first phase has already been proven and constructed.
Thank you.
Second.
Did someone make the motion? Okay. Now, roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell. Yes. Mr. Riker,
Yes.
Ms. Brito, Mr. Wall, Mr. Fleming, Mr. Riccardi,
Yes.
Mr. Herring,
Yeah.
Mr. Hudak.
Yes. Excuse me, gentlemen, in the hallway, would you mind closing that door, please? Thank you. Okay. Next up, we have changes to the agenda schedule. As part of your packet, you've all received proposed dates for planning board meetings for 2022. Anyone care to comment, or are everybody okay with these dates? Okay.
So I've had the opportunity to review that, and they do not come out on I hate to say the major holidays. And regarding it's Holomoid Pesach for the one day. And
What date is that?
The April day, which is
April 4th?
no, the April 18th day.
Okay.
And the one day is also over. It looked like it was not over the first 2 or last 2 days of Sukkot. So the board traditionally, I guess respectfully, we should be able to have a quorum without the folks. We check. The board has traditionally taken either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur off, or the first 2 days of Passover completely.
Okay.
But it's not on the first 2 or last 2 days of Sukkot, or the first 2 or last 2 days of Passover.
All right, can we just submit this as into the record instead of reading?
Well, it's better for the record. I've generally had the practice of just reading the dates. It's easy enough. I can do it if you want.
No, it's all right. Okay, so the 2022 proposed meeting dates are January 10th, which would be our reorg meeting, and January 24th, which I think we should have. You all can comment on that if you wish. February 7th, February 28th, March 7th, March 21st, April 4th, April 18th, May 2nd, May 16th, June 6th, June 20th, July 18th, August 1st, August 15th, September 19th, October 3rd, October 17th, November 7th, November 21st, December 5th, and December 12th. 22 meetings total. Let's hope we can all get it done. Any comments or questions about any of these dates?
Does it fall to July?
Correct. Correct, and it seems that vacations are always big in the month of July as well. We can never get a quorum. So if this is all okay with you guys, I'd like a motion to memorialize these meeting dates for 2022. Anyone care to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve that.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dolan?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein? Mr. Wall? Mr. Fleming? Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring? Mr. Hudak?
Yes. Okay, we're in wow. 7:40 and we're jumping right into our first application. How about that? We have block 4101, lots 18 and 19, Jackson Woods. Gentlemen, come on up. And, get settled, Mr. Clee, and then if you could lead off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an application for time extension associated with a preliminary major site plan. Currently in place is protection of the changes in the zoning and the general terms and conditions of the approval until June 18th, 2022. This is a large project. I believe is governed by a GDP approval as well as a settlement agreement. The applicant's looking for a 5-year extension to June 18th, 2027. Again, the protection period's in place. The applicant should just provide some testimony regarding any changes to the plan of what the board previously approved.
Mr. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, the zone for the project has not changed, so there's no negative impact should the board not move forward with the time extension. The applicant should indicate the reason that they're asking for the time extension for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. You'll need to use a microphone.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Ron Shimanowitz from the firm of Hutton Shimanowitz, here on behalf of the applicant Jackson Development Company LLC. You've heard the brief summary of our request from your professionals. There's not a heck of a lot to add. As was stated, we're seeking a 5-year extension of the prior granted preliminary approval. The reason for that basically is it's a very large development. We've made our way through what we refer to as the very first section, the central. We are now under construction in the southeast section. We're really requesting this extension with regard to the southwest section. As was requested, I can represent that nothing has changed zoning wise or to the approvals or the proposal. If the board wishes to hear more about that or testimony, I have with me Mr. Dave Erickson from Matrix New World, very familiar with the application, as well as Tom Bavino, who's a principal with the applicant. But the application is really quite straightforward. We just need more time because we won't get to the southwest for a while. These are very big sections, approximately rough numbers, 500 units per section. So it takes a bit of work to get to approval. And for those reasons, we're requesting the 5-year extension. Up to the board if you want to hear more. We will be before you on the next application as well with the same gentleman to my left, where we'll present the exhibit boards and orient the board to the different sections and what we're proposing. That is on the bike path application. But for now, the extension is pretty straightforward unless the board would like to hear more from my client or my expert.
I do have a question. You're not going to disturb the site, or when would you consider your wait until the 5 years is up or whenever you've come back before us before you disturb that site?
That's correct. Yeah. There's no disturbance to the site prior to us coming before you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions? No? Okay. At this time, I need to open it up for public comment. So at this time, if anyone cares to speak about this application, please step up to the microphone. In favor? Aye. Okay. Any further comments from anyone or any questions? Does anyone care to make a motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring? Mr. Hudak?
Yes. Congratulations. Okay, so I guess you guys are going to remain right there, and we're going to go into the next application, which is block 4101, lot 18, Jackson Development Company, LLC. This is final major site plan for a bike path. And Mr. Clee?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As indicated, this application relates to the prior application, the Jackson Trails, Jackson Woods southeast and southwest section. We now know that that protection is in place till 2027. The applicant will come back for final site plan for the recreational amenities, the other components of the application. This application is looking for final site plan approval for a bike path, a recreational portion of the final approval. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a report dated November 19th of this year. Project's located in the PMURD, the Planned Mixed Unit Residential Development Zone, where recreational facilities are permitted accessory uses. So the bike trail path is a permitted use in the zone, so they're corrected before the board. Other than the applicant explaining where it is, how it's going to be constructed, the environmental impacts, what they had to do to get this approved by outside agencies, we want to know who's going to own and operate it. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. This application is slightly more involved, but not
Microphone, please.
Getting this application is slightly more involved, but not super complicated. As your professional stated, this is
For the record, please identify yourself.
Ron Shemanowitz from the firm of Hutton Shemanowitz for the applicant, Jackson Development Company LLC. My apologies, this is a separate application. You're absolutely right. Again, this application has a little bit more meat on the bone than the extension we just did. I think what's best on this one, because it's been some time since we've been before you, is I'd like to have Dave Erickson sworn in as our professional engineer. We also have Mr. Bavino here, who's a representative of the applicant. If we need him to speak, we'll bring him forward, but I think the bulk of the testimony will be by Mr. Erickson. So I think the very most efficient thing to do would have him sworn in as our expert.
Mr. Erickson, thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last and your affiliation, and then through the chairman, your credentials to his request?
David Erickson, EARECKSON. I'm Vice President at Matrix New World Engineering. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from NJIT. I've been a licensed professional engineer for over 20 years, testified at numerous planning boards all across the state. I've been here quite a few times testifying before this board as well.
Licensed in New Jersey, correct?
Licensed in New Jersey.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And Dave, just by way of background, how long have you been associated with the Jackson 21 development? 15 years. Okay, thank you. So you're intimately familiar with the development, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's jump right into it. You have a board up on the easel. If you could identify that board by title and date, and then we're going to mark that as Exhibit 1, Exhibit A1.
So this is the same exhibit that was submitted for the extension of the preliminary approval. And the reason I'm starting with this one is because it shows the relationship between the 6 development lots. 4 of them are 4 developments: central, southeast, the affordable site, and southwest. There's a small lot that was created for Ocean County for road widening purposes and stormwater, and then the open space lot, which is where the bike trail runs.
Mr. Erickson, for the benefit of the audience, perhaps you could use your pointer on the exhibit on the wall, please.
Certainly.
And Dave, just for the record, if you could give us the title and date of that plan so we could have it marked as A1.
So it is overall site plan, amended preliminary site plan, the Jackson Woods, block 4101, lots 18 and 19. And the date is 8/16/21.
Thank you.
So this overall site plan shows the 6 lots, the 4 development lots: central, southeast, the affordable site, southwest, the small lot for Ocean County road widening purposes, and then the open space lot, which is where the bike trail is being constructed. The bike trail connects southeast to Fish Road, and it connects southwest to that bike trail. So that's why I wanted to show this exhibit, because it shows the relationship for the entire development. This plan was submitted as part of the bike trail application. Called site plan, final major site plan, the Jackson Woods Bike Path, block 4101, lots 18. So this bike trail approval is only on the open space lot. Okay. Have it up on the screen so I can point things.
Anthony?
Can you rotate it counterclockwise? And then zoom to extents. Or I can look at them one at a time, I guess. That's good. So this shows in greater detail the connection to the southeast section. The piece that's on the southeast lot was actually part of the application for southeast that was recently approved by this board. And then it shows the bike trail running along the existing West Fish Road. This road has been maintained, or was for many, many years maintained by Jackson Township. It's a dirt road. There's no vegetation. We won't be removing any vegetation. As part of this, it's just an 8-foot wide bike trail that's going to run down the dirt road. The reason that we need approvals is it's running through wetland buffers. You can see this feature is a wetlands. These features that are hatched are all wetlands. We are not putting the bike trail in any wetlands, only through the buffers. So we will need a DEP permit. It's called a GP17 application. And as part of this, once this is approved, we're going to donate this open space lot to a public agency, either Jackson or the county or some other public agency. A GP17, if a private person wants to put a bike trail in wetland buffers, there's a limit on how many buffers you can disturb. A public agency, there's no limit. So that's why we're going to be donating it to some public agency if Jackson wants it, or the county. The lower side, lower exhibit, you can scroll down, scroll up, please. This shows the connection from the southwest lot all the way up to the intersection with bike trail from the southeast section. So we don't show anything on the southwest lot because we will show that when we come into final approval for the southwest lot. There are no wetlands buffers on the southwest lot that we're going to have to worry about, or there's hardly any. There's a little one right here, but this is the same thing. This is a dirt road that exists as a dirt road right now. We are not going to be removing any vegetation. We're not filling any wetlands. We're only running through the buffers to get from one place to the other. The way that we intend to build this to limit environmental, any environmental impacts, we're going to scrape the area under the 8-foot bike trail and make it smooth and toss the dirt to the side on top of the dirt, build the bike path, and then smooth out the dirt around the edges of the bike path. So we won't be going into any woods, any vegetation. It's only going to be limited to working in the dirt. The bike path is going to be made out of a permeable material, and there is no vehicular traffic, so there won't be any contamination being generated by this bike path. So we feel that there are absolutely no environmental impacts from this. On our plans, we showed a permeable concrete bike path. We are going to ask the board for the ability to put whatever the DEP will let us put there. We're thinking of talking to them about a stone dust bike path, which is much easier to maintain. Concrete at some point would have to be replaced. The stone bike path, you just add more and smooth it out again. So we're hoping that that will be acceptable to them, but whatever the DEP wants to is what we would like the ability to do. There is an easement shown around this bike trail so that once we donate it to whatever public agency, the maintenance, the construction and maintenance will occur within the easement and be the responsibility of 2 separate entities. The Southeast Homeowners Association will maintain the bike path from the southeast to Fish Road. The owner of the Southwest rental apartments will own and maintain the bike path from the intersection down to the southwest property line. And then on the properties themselves, those 2 entities will maintain bike path on those properties. We are.
Dave, just by way of clarification, because I know it was raised in the review letters as to the maintenance, what you just described in terms of maintenance, that would be if the bike path were to remain private in a sense. If the town or the county or some other entity were to take it, the proposal is that would be a fully public bike path and therefore maintained by the public entity. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify your testimony.
So we can have either one of those options. It could be maintained by the individual associations, and we would put signage up at the entrance, letting everybody know that it's a private bike path. The other alternative is that whatever public agency takes the open space lot, they could own it and maintain it, and it could be open to everybody in Jackson. I think that's generally the entire extent, unless we want to go through review comments. I think I hit most of them.
Microphone, please, we can't.
Microphone.
My apologies. I'm looking at the RVE letter of November 19th, 2021. On page 3 of that, in Roman numeral 4, there's general comments. We can go through those very quickly. I think Dave hit most of them. Number 1 is acceptable. I'm sorry, that's actually a waiver. They're asking for an updated survey. Number 2 is testimony regarding the DP permitting. Mr. Erickson testified we will need a GP 17 permit, and that needs to be through a public entity. That's how you get a GP 17. Number 3 is a list of property owners to be submitted. We will comply. Number 4, the applicant provide testimony regarding any grading that will be required. I don't know, Dave, if you spoke to the grading or not.
I said we were just going to smooth out the area under the bike path, throw the spoils to the side in the dirt, build the bike path, and then smooth it back out to the edges of the bike path.
Excellent. And then number 5 is whether there's any, how excavated materials will be handled. And the answer is there is no, the excavated materials.
No export of materials, and the only import is going to be the bike path material itself.
Okay. Number 6 is approved variance and waiver list shall be provided. That's acceptable to us. Number 7 is we should provide testimony as to the overall environmental impacts. You certainly described that. Comment number 8 is requesting testimony regarding measures to minimize environmental impacts. You also covered that. Number 9, the applicant should confirm the project will not include the clearing of any trees or vegetation. You also included that in your testimony. Number 10, looking for testimony regarding signage. There is no signage proposed. Is that correct?
Unless it stays private, which then we will have to put signs up, just notifying everybody that's a
Privacy signs.
So
Okay.
depending on where that goes, we'll modify the plans and either add signs or leave them off.
Okay, and number 11 is what we talked about earlier about the maintenance responsibilities of the path. And the background there is that this path was originally intended to be a private facility to serve the southeast section and the southwest section. But the path is on an open space lot, which will be owned either by the town, perhaps the county, could be some other public entity. If it turns out that the town wishes the path to be truly public, we would propose that the path be maintained by that public entity. It just makes a lot of sense and causes a lot less complications. If the path is just going to be for the benefit of the southeast section, southwest section, and it's private, then the homeowners association in the southeast and the landlord, if it's a rental job in the southwest, would maintain the path.
Mr.
So-
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just so we're clear, the determination of a public entity isn't something the planning board can do. If they want to ask the governing body, they can go to the governing body and ask them, but I'm not sure that without that information before the board, just testimony. It's not a proffer that they're going to go find a public entity.
And what is the usual protocol for them to do that?
If they wanted to ask the town,
Yes.
they'd write a letter to the governing body asking.
And we would certainly agree with that. I think that the comment is well placed. And if the board were inclined to grant the application, I think a reasonable condition would be to require the applicant to go to the town council and get a decision, a disposition on that issue.
And just so the board understands, if the governing body at the time they approved the project wanted that, they probably would have done it. So I don't want the planning board to think that at some point, just because they're going to go ask the governing body is going to take this over, which is why we needed to hear which entities are going to be responsible for each, unless they can get a public agency to take it over, the town, the county, the state.
Well, along those lines, I perceive, but please disagree with me if you do disagree, that the simplest approach at this point should the board be generally inclined to grant the application, if they grant it subject to making the request to the municipality. And if for some reason, if the municipality declines that request, I think the easiest thing would be to come back, because you're gonna have a gap in the trail. And there needs to be a better explanation at that point about how those trails are gonna work on, both separate properties.
So it's not about ownership that's causing the problem. The problem's going to be if no public agency takes this, we can't get this permit. It's got to either be the county or the town or a public agency. But the way the plans are set up right now, there's a access and maintenance easement on those plans that is owned by the homeowner association, and so the maintenance is good.
So if so correct me if I'm wrong from a legal perspective, if in fact the municipality declines and the county declines to co-write the permit or however that process would work, then the project as presented tonight would have to be abandoned, because in fact, you just have trails on both entities' lots.
I think it's a question of what they decline. I mean, the intent here is that the open space lot upon which these trails are designed, that lot is clearly intended to be dedicated to a public entity. The sub-question is, what about the trails? So you could have the public entity owning the open space lot. That has always been the plan. If the public entity is not comfortable with the trails, responsibility for the trails, that's where we have carved out an easement so that the private entities, the homeowners association and or the landlord of the rental development would be responsible for the maintenance.
So
But the key item, sorry to interrupt, is what Mr. Erickson said. If the property is not publicly owned property, a GP 17 is not available. Is
This extensive of the GP 17, there's limitations on how many buffers a private applicant can disturb.
Understood. So I would like to hear through the chairman, I'd like to hear from the applicant, your bullet point proposal as to what conditions you would think would be reasonable to impose so as not to overcomplicate what the board is doing with a series of what ifs.
Well, I think there's a couple of conditions. One is to have the town council confirm that the lot 18, do I have the proper lot? That lot 18 is going to be accepted as public open space by the town. That would be part one. Part two would be, assuming they are going to accept it as public open space, what disposition of the trail portion, the bike trail portion, should be imposed. And there's two choices there. One is an easement through the public lot, the open space lot, which would allow for a private use of the trail, or just incorporate the trail into the open space lot as a public facility. And that's really up to either the council and
But here's my question. This is why I asked you to do that. Let's presume for a second that the council is fine with the portion of the trail over the open space lot being open to the public. Does the public then have to stop at both borders, or are you proposing turning the entirety of the trail over to the public entity?
I think they maybe you could explain the endpoints of the trail. That's
And
an
the
answer.
board may have understood it better than I will.
No, in answer Mr. Gertner's question, maybe you could describe where you end up on the trail if it turns out to be private.
Right now, it's into a parking lot. In the current plan, once we come back into the final southwest, that may change a little bit depending on the layout. This plan is now quite old. I would think that we're going to come back. So that's actually a question for our client. Do they have to stop here or can it come all
Actually, yeah, Mr. Vivino would have to be sworn in if we could do that. Perhaps he's the best to answer that.
Just before you do.
Sure.
Mr. Fleming has a question.
Yes,
This trail roughly follows West Road, correct?
Right down the middle.
Okay. West Road still maintain its status as a road or vacant?
And vacated.
It's already been vacated.
Yes.
Correct. With the original subdivision application that created the 6 lots.
Okay, Mr. Pavino.
Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information, questions, comments, or testimony you're about to present to the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your affiliation, please?
Tom Bovino, B as in boy, O-V-I-N-O. I'm the manager of Jackson Development Company. Okay, so the question, we're kind of getting into the weeds here. I think the threshold question, and again, for the benefit of board members who weren't here many, many years ago when this started, the intent when we first came to the board was to try and link these communities to avoid people going onto the main county roads and provide an element of public safety internally. So that meant connecting all of the different neighborhoods. Due to the environmental sensitivity, their C1 streams, et cetera, we're able to do that. Central does not have the problem, the gardens, because it's already right abutting Commodore. But the southwest and southeast sections that front on Freehold Road, they have to go internally from south to north for pedestrians and bikers to get to West Commodore. I said East Commodore, I meant West Commodore. So this is the only option that we can explore by getting a DEP permit to do so. The other option that was brought up way back was who would own the land? And I think Mr. Peters was there. And at the time, I'm not sure if the town had any inclination to want to own the land, but that was many, many years ago. So the intent of what we're representing tonight is to revisit that issue and, you know, ask the planning board, ask the town council, does the township of Jackson want to own the land in perpetuity? Now, there's still some uplands that I know Mr. Lee wanted to deed restrict the uplands portion. Even though we have wetlands and buffers, there's still uplands portions that could be developed passively for parks and whatnot. But Mr. Lee's intention was to dedicate this land permanently and deed restrict it. If the town's interested, great, we're offering it to the town first. If the town's not interested, we'll go to the county, their lands trust, see if they're interested. If they're not interested, we can go to like Division of Fish and Game, or there's other nonprofits out there that may want to own the land. So I think that has to be like the threshold issue. Everything then drives from that. If I'm very confident we're going to get a public entity to own the land. And at that point, it makes it easier for Dave to get the GP 17 permit from DEP. For some reason, the DEP places a higher threshold on private developers than it does public entities. So it's easier to understand that question first, get that answer, then we can pursue how we pursue the GP 17.
I understand, you know, need this for these approvals. However, that doesn't answer the question if a private citizen, you know, wants to go down that bike path. Are they going to be able to go from, you know, the beginning to the end without impeding on any of your private property? And what happens if they do? That is, you know, a kicker question.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, you have private communities now, apartment communities. If people that don't live there ride their bikes in there, are they trespassing? I mean, I don't know how you can police that. If you don't want signage, we don't have to have signage. If it's privately owned. Again, we're not here to really dictate to the town. We'll do whatever the town wants us to do. If that, you know, I'm saying that in a spirit of trying not to make this difficult. But, you know, we have a private homeowners association. I think they can be a little more stringent than, say, an apartment community in terms of how they're going to maintain As Mr. Erickson pointed out in the southeast section, there's an internal walking trail, a bike trail that allows the residents of the ponds and the southeast section to go through the southeast section. Once they get to the property line and then go through this open space lot, that's where you could have, right, some issues. Do they continue maintaining that path all the way till it hits West Fish Road, which is now paved? Right where the dirt road hits West Fish, if you know that area, it goes from dirt to pavement. That's generally the area where the open space lot ends. I don't know if anyone's going to police it as a practical matter.
Well, you understand that we're crossing our Ts and dotting our Is. We need to understand the what ifs. What you say is all well and good, but we need to, I think, hammer this out.
Well,
Sure. Yeah.
If you're looking to cede the land to a public entity, and it's going to be used by the public, it's going to be public bid funds and payment, you have to give access to the public. Where are you going to park? By parking for public?
No, the only, as a practical matter, they'd probably park, if you know West Fish, it's a very wide road. They'd probably park on the edge of West Fish and then access the open space lot from West Fish.
There was a comment made about uplands. I just wanted to point out, since it was made, the area here, a very extensive amount of uplands that is not regulated by buffers. And then the same white areas here and down through here are also all uplands that could be developed with passive or active
is
recreation.
that part of the same lot that was noticed?
Those areas that I just pointed out are all on lot 18, all on the open space lot.
I'm a big proponent of this type of project. My daughter lives in Frankfort, Illinois, and they have exactly this type of trail throughout their community. It's a wonderful thing for the community and for the residents of the town. One of the things that I noticed that they have done there is that they have narrowed the entries to the trail by placing almost like not a closed gate, an open gate, so that there can be no ATV traffic or vehicular traffic. I would encourage a similar type of situation at the areas crossing those open road areas, that there be some type of a open gate system that narrows the entry points so that we don't get vehicular traffic or ATV traffic on this bike trail, which is a great idea. It's a wonderful thing for the town. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Liability shift is tremendous without any discussion about it. Commissioner, we should run the joint insurance fund to score it. It's not clear. Maybe it is contiguous pathway, but if it's not, it's non-contiguous and it breaks, that would be an issue. Whether or not the governing body, Jackson Township, want to take on that liability, which this is to me mainly a liability posture. We have experts in this field. That hasn't been scored or looked at, but additional premium may be involved to take on that role. If it's non-contiguous, I think that would be something of concern. And the notion of it being public and non-public, depending on the claims and association at any particular time, that's tenuous at best, and then you're up to the whimsy of the board at that time, in that year. And as soon as an individual is injured on that path, which will eventually happen, then they'll go back in the deposition and pull these minutes and these votes and their testimony. We want to work a little bit, seems a little bit out of order as far as the conversation, but I would recommend everybody will set a broad, this is seems like part of it, but that doesn't seem like to have a maybe it is somewhere, more of a macro view, so you can see whether it's contiguous or it breaks, or whether or not you have signs that say turn around. That kind of thing. Because bike paths, by the nature, you want to take this bike paths so you can really traverse them in a safe way. Sure. All right. So those are some inputs that I have. I think last two are also from looked at by from the liability.
I agree with you. Mr. Gerber.
Yeah, so through the chair to the applicant, as I see it, listening to everyone and my perception, either, I think perhaps you should do one of two things. You should either carry this based on the input and go to the governing body so that when you come back to the board, you can actually tell the board what the governing body's doing, and then some of these other questions can flush themselves out. That's not as bad as it may sound globally, and I know you're shaking your head, yes, I appreciate that. But just because your application is so large, you have other pieces going on anyway, it's not the worst thing in the world. The other, well, let me stop there because that would be the easiest thing to do, quite frankly. So is that acceptable? Before I even give the alternative.
Well, if we could hear the alternative, we'd appreciate it.
Well, but I prefer, the other alternative would be, and the board may not be amenable to this if it doesn't have enough information in any event, which is to make it simply make a preliminary approval subject to you're going to the council and or the county, again, to verify if you obtain a public entity or not, and then you'd still have to come back for final in any event to know what's happening.
No, the one thing I just want to clarify, I think we're going to choose the first option unless my attorney advises me otherwise.
I thought it was
but-
the easiest one
But
also.
no, Mr. Wall made a good point, and I want to make it clear to the board, this is not one contiguous path. I don't want the board to get the impression that people can meander into Southwest and back out again, over to Southeast and back out again, but you are technically entering into an HOA situation. So if you're a member of the public, again, from an enforcement point of view or anything like that, I don't know that it's going to actually arise, probably until somebody falls, and then there'll be all kinds of gentlemen like this to my right involved. But no, I just want the board to be, I want to be clear, because I think the point of tonight was to come and have a discussion and see what the town wants us to do. So we do have to start with the council. Let them decide, do they want to own the land and how they want to handle the bike path. We're going to do what the town decides. We just wanted to make there are portions of the path that could be open to the town, but not all of the paths in a contiguous way. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
So, and again, I would defer to the class 2 officer here, but it would seem to me that this is better vetted because it's a global legislative determination of what the municipality wants to see with this bike path, the connectivity. I mean, there's options, and I will say this out loud. Mr. Wall is very good at fleshing out options to benefit the citizens of Jackson. And that's where the discussion really should start, and with the advice and consent of the council and the mayor. Because there's a lot of ways to handle this.
No, we appreciate your suggestion, Mr. Gertner, and you heard my client. I think the answer has been given. We would like to carry the application, give us an opportunity to appear at the council and flesh it out with the governing body.
Okay, how long do you think this would take?
Go to the council, get feedback, and then come back to the board, because it's a pending application. The chair is questioning scheduling and carrying it. So, yeah. I don't,
90 days?
we don't know how fast we'll get on the council agenda is the problem.
Want to throw a number, 6 months? 90 days?
I think
90
we
is better than
carry
6
it for
months.
90 days, and if we need more time, we'll certainly communicate with the board. Yeah.
So that would be the first meeting in March. Of course, I lost it. Sorry.
in 6 months.
All right.
Well, that's if they have to pass an ordinance. Well, but they can carry, we don't want to get, they have time issues to just carry it out 6 months. You're right, but there's a compromise in there, which is to respectfully, to carry the meeting to the March 7, 2022 meeting without the, subject to the board's approval, without the requirement of further notice. The applicant will waive time to March 21, 2022. And at that point, it gets them on their, on their horses too, to determine what steps the governing body wants to take. And they can then write to carry it further. And at that point, but to carry it out 6 months, they're going to want to waive notice. They can't waive notice 6 months out. It's just too far,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Is that fair?
Yes, we appreciate that.
All right.
Yep.
So can I get a motion to carry block 4101, lot 18, Jackson Development Company LLC to the March 7th, 2022 meeting?
Before you do that, could I get some kind of commitment from the project to look into that narrowing gate system? And when you come back, that would be part of what you would bring back to us at that
Yeah,
time?
you're referring to like the bollards, like the concrete?
Correct.
like- Yes,
Correct.
correct. Yes,
Just
that was
something
our
that
intention.
narrows the entryway there.
Correct, that was our intention.
And that would save you then from having to come back again when I bring this up again.
Yes,
Thank you.
No
appreciate
problem.
that. Thank you.
And charging stations for the electric light. So March 7th meeting, to carry this application. Can I get a motion, please? Roll call.
Mr. Dolan?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Riker? Mr. Bernstein? Mr. Wall? Mr. Fleming? Mr. Riccardi?
Yes.
Mr. Herring? Mr. Hudak?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break before our next application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An application for preliminary and final major site plan, block 2301, lot 10, on Hermann Road. The application does have a history. It does have a prior approval, somewhat smaller building. And in conjunction with that prior approval, conservation easements were established for the on-site wetlands, as well as site triangle easements for the proposed driveway connections at that time. The applicants requesting that the existing conservation easement be modified to reflect the current DEP location of the on-site freshwater wetlands, and also looking to have the existing site triangle easements extinguished, mostly to facilitate the new driveway locations that are proposed. The project involves a 35,900 square foot off a warehouse building, which includes 900 square feet of business office. The applicant is seeking variance approval for deficient lot, or deficient building front setback, as well as deficient parking from a non-residential use. 20 feet required and 8 feet provided. We should have some testimony from the applicant regarding the operations of the site, what we can expect as far as delivery vehicles. And I think the applicant should discuss the on-site circulation. We do note that there's no circulation or vehicle circulation available to the back of the building. I'm sure that'll raise a fire issue. Some testimony from the applicant, on that issue. Parking does comply. 29 spaces are required and 33 spaces are provided. The application also includes a connection to public water and sewer on East Commodore. Some testimony from the applicant as far as those improvements. It's indicated that a 28-foot new paved surface is going to be provided from East Commodore to the I'll call it the western end of the track. There should be some discussion as far as the road improvements that are required. Ordinance would require curb and sidewalk to be provided across the entire frontage. I think the applicant's proposing to provide the new 28-foot wide pavement surface in conjunction with the utility improvements. Some technical revision required to the applicant. We do note that it is in a LM zone and surrounded by wetlands. So maybe as far as landscaping goes, some enhancements to the front of the building. There's not really any room to do it in to the rear. That's all at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our office has a report dated November 19th of this year. The parcel is located in the LM Commercial Office Light Industrial Zone, which permits contractors' offices as a permitted use, provided all materials and equipment are stored within a completely enclosed building. And a warehouse is also a permitted use, provided that no goods are sold retail from the premises. All items are stored within a completely enclosed building, and the warehousing or storage of hazardous chemicals is prohibited. It appears from the application that 3 variances are required. The first is a front yard setback for the principal building where 100 feet is required and 55 feet is proposed. The second is a variance for the side yard setback for an accessory use, which is the trash enclosure, where 30 feet is required and 13.5 feet is proposed. And a parking area setback from the right of way where 20 feet is required and 8 feet is proposed. As Mr. Clee had started to indicate, that the site's impacted in the rear by wetlands. Previously, they had an approval for about 25,000 square foot of space. This application is for about 36,000 square feet of space. In order to accomplish that, the site's sort of been moved forward. By moving the site forward, the parking gets closer to the street. For those of you who are familiar with Hermann Road, it's, for all intents and purposes, a small industrial park. The properties are zoned LM, they back up to 195. So I think the board should give due consideration to the developability of the area and what was intended by the zoning in that area in terms of yield. So is the proposed variance relief offset by the increased square footage they can get, which in fact turns into a rateable for the municipality. We do expect some testimony regarding the proposed uses for the site. We have loading docks on one side. We have what appear to be drive-up bays to the smaller units. So we're going to look for some testimony. What's going to be in the building? What's the anticipated lease for the building? Who are they going to lease it to? And what truck traffic would be expected to each of the units? That's going to drive the circulation issues on the site. That's enough for now. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick thing relating to circulation. One design exception, one connection or one driveway connection per street is permitted, 2 is proposed.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, board professionals, and public. My name is Kenneth Pape. I'm an attorney with the firm of Heilbrunn Pape. This evening, I have the privilege and responsibility of representing your applicant. As has been read into the record, this is a request to construct approximately 36,000 square foot warehouse on a property that's slightly less than 5 acres in size. Before we begin our substantive presentation, may I ask, Counselor, if you could confirm receipt of our notices and confirm the board has jurisdiction. Thank you. The presentation this evening will be through the testimony of Thomas Muller. Thomas Muller is a design engineer with Dynamic. He has prepared the plans that are before you. And David Collins, the applicant. Mr. Muller will take us through existing conditions. He'll take us through the proposed development plan, and he'll take us through, after going through the engineering, he has a professional planner's license, and he'll take us through the variances. A couple of, I think, very important points that we'd ask that we could focus your attention on as we begin. And one is that in order to develop this property as proposed with a fully sprinklered building, we've got to bring water service to the building. And we are proposing to bring not only water service, but sewer service. The distance that we're talking about bringing the water and sewer at our client's expense is 2,000 linear feet. Our client's prepared to bring sewer and water 2,000 linear feet, which will not only provide a water source to this building, but bring a firefighting water supply down the roadway. In addition, our client has made a commitment to, and you'll hear this evening on the record, to resurface the Hermann Road. And that's a distance of approximately 2,000 feet, a dimension of 28 feet wide. It's a very substantial commitment that's being made. In order to install the water and sewer, we anticipate that there will be some disruption to the road surface. We're making a commitment to resurface that entire roadway. We are asking for variance relief. We are 11,000 square feet larger than the application that was brought in the last time. But the last time, all of these improvements were not part of the proffer to the municipality. And we ask that you consider that these improvements, which are benefits not only to our client, but to the general public, be considered in that regard. Just two simple facts. We will not ask you for any outdoor storage. This would be a building that all of the activities are confined to the interior of the building. And that we're going to ask for permission to have 3, 2, or 1 tenants. When we go out to the marketplace, we'll agree that the maximum would be 3. We anticipate that these tenants would be either distribution, storage type tenants, or possibly assembly, fabrication, and light manufacturing, all of which are expressly identified in your ordinance as permitted. With that as an opening statement, board members, I would ask if we could bring Thomas Muller forward, have him sworn. We'll share his credentials with you before making the substantive presentation. Thank you.
Let's grab the mic also. Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your affiliation, please, and then through the chairman, your credentials?
Sure. My name is Thomas Muller, Muller. I'm a senior principal with the firm Dynamic Engineering Consultants. I'm the applicant's engineer as well as planner. I prepared the site plan package and associated reports that were submitted to the board and which you're reviewing tonight.
Are you licensed in New Jersey for both engineering and?
Yes, I'm licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey in good standing, as well as a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey in good standing as well.
Thank you. We accept you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Muller, I'm going to ask if you could, in a narrative fashion, begin by identifying the property, where the property is located, some of the physical characteristics, and describe the existing site conditions.
Absolutely. On the easel, I have an overall aerial map exhibit and illustrates the existing conditions on the site, as well as a lot of the surrounding uses around the property. It is also on the projector, as you see there. So what we're working on here today is block 2301, lot 10. It's commonly known as 498 Hermann Road in the township of Jackson. It's in the northern portion of the municipality. It is located out of the jurisdiction of the Pinelands Commission. We have frontage only on Hermann Road, but we are located about 1,400 feet away from the intersection of Hermann Road and East Commodore Boulevard. For purposes of the exhibit, north is on the top of the page, just to orient yourself. The site is outlined in the yellow outline, and the ring around the site is a 200-foot offset that shows the properties that are within 200 feet. On the bottom of the page is the intersection of East Commodore Boulevard and Hermann Road.
Do you have a pointer to?
Yeah, I don't have a pointer with me, but I'll have a laser pointer, but. Thank you. So the site, as I mentioned, is the yellow highlighted area in the center of the site of the prop, and the Hermann Road is here in the middle of the page. And then Hermann Road extends southerly towards East Commodore Boulevard, where the intersection of Hermann Road and East Commodore Boulevard. And as I mentioned, north is pointing up on this page.
Did we mark that A1?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mueller, as you're doing that, I'm going to ask if you could comment on the surrounding uses. Mr. Peters used the term that it functions as an industrial park. But if you could just share with the board the types of uses that are on Hermann Road in close proximity to our client's site.
Yes, absolutely. Exhibit A1 is marked its overall aerial map exhibit prepared by our office dated December 6th, 2021. Exhibit A1 just illustrates the site as well as the existing uses around the site. As you can see on the exhibit, majority of the areas surrounding us on all sides are wooded areas. We see a lot of wetland areas. The ROS zone is located immediately to the north of our site, which is a conservation overlay zone as well. So we have an undeveloped piece of land to the north of us. Just beyond that property is Route 195, and beyond that is the Metedeconk National Golf Club. To the east of us, again, is an undeveloped piece of land, and beyond that are additional wooded areas. To the south of us, we have direct frontage on Hermann Road, but beyond that, we have wooded areas. And as you work your way down on Hermann Road towards East Commodore Boulevard, you see a lot of other similar uses, small warehouses, light manufacturing uses, all within the LM zone. As Mr. Pape and Mr. Peters said earlier, this is really acting as a small industrial park. Hermann Road is almost like an internal circulation area. Hermann Road is a dead end. You know, there's no commercial or residential uses on Hermann Road beyond our site. So you only see truck traffic and business traffic associated with the existing uses on our area of Hermann Road. And then again, to the west of the site, as I mentioned, are wooded areas and other industrial uses. In terms of the site itself, very simple. It's undeveloped. Probably the most significant characteristic of the existing site is that we have about over an acre of wetlands on the site. We have a 50-foot transition area off those wetlands, which really pushes the developable area to the plateau that's located in the front of the site. There's also a relatively steep slope within the wetland area that also triggers some of the design components that I'll be talking about in a few seconds. I could hop into the proposed conditions. On the easel is marked as Exhibit A2. Exhibit A2 is a site plan rendering prepared by our office dated December 6th, 2021.
But you utilize what's
Yep.
on this.
Absolutely. The exhibit is also on the screen now. This is the same north orientation as the aerial exhibit. We have north at the top of the page. The proposed development is colorized. This is basically just a colorized version of the site plan drawing that was submitted as part of the application. We overlaid the landscaping design on top of it, so you can kind of see what the final development's going to look like after we construct the building. The building itself is located in the center of the exhibit. It's in this dark orange color. The top portion of this exhibit shows the wooded areas that are going to be remaining, which are basically also the wetland areas. And then along the front of the site, you see gray hatches and yellow striping, which illustrates some of the parking and circulation areas that we are proposing. So I typically like to give the board an understanding of how we came to this size of the building here. Like I mentioned numerous times already, we have a lot of site constraints on the northern piece of the land, and as well as the western portion of the site. We're surrounded on two sides by wetlands on our own site. On the eastern portion of the site, there are actually some off-site wetlands, which has a transition area that encroaches onto our site. And then from the front of the site, we have driveway connections to Hermann Road. And we're providing an 8-foot landscaped island, which complies with the safety island standard in the ordinance. When we build that box for ourselves, we created this layout that you see here in front of you on the screen, which resulted in a warehouse building in the size of 35,904 square feet. That building will be used as a permitted use in the LM zone. As Mr. Peters mentioned, he listed a number of the permitted uses in the zone. We do not have a tenant identified for this building, particularly at this point, but what we can say is it will be a compliant use with the LM zone standards. We are contemplating up to 3 users, no more than 3 users in this building. The layout lends itself to accommodate those users.
each of those users would have drive-in doors on the front of the building, which are basically just overhead garage doors that would open and allow flush entrance into the building. It's not a loading dock or anything. It would operate like a simple garage door. And then on the western portion of the building is a loading area. It's a concrete area. It's uncovered. That would be for your very limited number of WB67 tractor trailer deliveries. So those are the largest tractor trailers that we would see in New Jersey. Just to walk you through the site very quickly, we have two driveways on Hermann Road. We have an eastern driveway and a western driveway. The eastern driveway opens up into a small parking area on the eastern portion of the site, and the trash enclosure will be located at the end of that parking area. Along the frontage of the site, we have a 24-foot wide driveway, as well as 9x18 parking spaces and a 5-foot wide sidewalk. Along the front of the building are those three drive-in garage doors that I mentioned. And as you make your way westward on the property, it's a second driveway and the loading area that I mentioned before. Additionally, on the western side of the building is a stabilized 18-foot wide fire access lane, which was reviewed and approved by the fire official. And we do actually extend that fire lane as a basin access lane around the back of the site, so along the northern portion of the building. That opens up into an above-ground infiltration basin, which complies with local and state regulation. And then you can see on the exhibit that we're substantially rebuffering and replanting the disturbance area beyond the site on the northern side of the building. Just quickly talking about the zoning on the site, there was some mention of variances, which I'd be happy to talk about now. For a majority of the site, however, the site is compliant. So it complies with the minimum lot area requirements, the minimum lot width, minimum lot frontage, depth, side yards, rear yards, building height, accessory building height, building coverage, and impervious coverage. I should mention that the ordinance requires us to exclude wetlands from the site when we're doing our impervious and building coverage calculations, which we have certainly done on the plans that you see in front of you. I would also like to mention that under existing conditions, the property boundary is actually set to the center line of Hermann Road. So we're providing a dedication of 25 feet along the entire frontage of the site. So we've actually subtracted out the wetlands and that dedication from all these calculations. The ordinance permits a maximum building coverage of 40%. We're only proposing 35,900 square feet, which is equivalent to 23.1% building coverage. So we're almost half of what the ordinance contemplates for this site. And again, as I'll continue to reiterate, it's mostly due to the fact that we have the wetland issue in the back and squeezing us into the smaller footprint here. The maximum impervious coverage, for instance, is 75% allowed. We are proposing 38.2%, which is about 59,000 square feet, which is also nearly half of what the ordinance permits on this particular piece of land. There's also a parking setback requirement of 10 feet, and we're proposing a setback of 10.6 feet to the side yard, which does comply with the ordinance. In terms of the bulk variances that you see on the screen, the front yard setback is 100 feet required. We have 55.0 feet proposed. The side yard setback for accessory buildings is 30 feet required, but we have 13.5 feet. The principal building itself complies with that requirement. However, the small trash enclosure does not comply with that requirement. Then there's a minimum front yard parking setback of 20 feet, which is required. We're proposing a setback of 8 feet. The 8-foot number was chosen intentionally because the safety island ordinance in the municipality requires a minimum of 8 feet and a minimum of 18 feet from the actual cartway. We're proposing 19 feet. So we meet the safety island requirement. However, we don't meet the actual parking setback requirement along the frontage. As I mentioned, 20 feet is required, 8 feet is proposed. In terms of the parking that we're proposing on the site, it is compliant with the ordinance in terms of the number of parking stalls. We're proposing a total of 30 parking spaces, all of which will be 9 feet by 18 feet, which complies with the ordinance. Generally, we see sites like this have a maximum office area of about 10% of the office. With the warehouse requirement parking of 1 space per 1,500 square feet, this property would comply with that requirement. The drive aisles are all 24 feet wide within the site, which complies with the land use ordinance. We are proposing 2 ADA compliant parking stalls, which brings federal code into satisfaction. We're doing parking and signage, parking striping and signage throughout the site. We did receive a review letter from the fire official. We are providing fire lane striping, which is shown in the yellow striping along 2 parking areas along the front of the building. The site's designed to have clear sight triangles. We are also providing a provision for 1 electrical vehicle charging station, which would comply with the recent legislation that was passed in New Jersey. I believe that was a comment from the board professionals, which we would certainly be happy to address as a condition of approval. As I mentioned before, there are variances for the parking layout itself, the setback to the front. There's also a variance required for the sidewalk width along the front of the building, where there's a parking overhang into the sidewalk. 6 feet is requested by the ordinance. We're proposing 5 feet. Considering the use of this building, we're not looking at a retail use. We're not looking at a commercial establishment that's going to have high turnover, lots of cars. This is a very limited warehouse and limited light manufacturing use. We're going to see very limited traffic. So what that means is we see very limited turnover in these parking spaces, which means that the people using this facility understand the sidewalk where the entrances are and everything. It's not something where we have to provide an additional factor of safety for people that are not familiar with the site. So my professional opinion, the 5-foot sidewalk is more than adequate for this project. There is a waiver requested for the number of driveways on the site. We are proposing 2 driveways, whereas 1 is permitted by the land use ordinance. That is a condition that was approved by this board a few years ago. There were 2 driveways proposed at that time and approved at that time. We're doing a very similar layout for the driveways here. They are necessary to adequately circulate the site. It provides a better access to both sides of the building. It certainly promotes emergency access as well as normal operation on the site. So the 2 driveways that you see on the site plan here are necessary to make the project feasible. There is a variance required for sidewalk and curbing along Hermann Road. If any of us have been out to the site, there is no curbing or sidewalk on any portions of Hermann Road, especially in the immediate area of this project. We are proposing to substantially improve Hermann Road by repaving it 28 feet wide along the entirety of the frontage of the site, which is over 500 feet, connecting it to the existing paved area on Hermann Road. And then we're actually resurfacing and reconstructing the existing pavement on Hermann Road all the way to East Commodore Boulevard as part of our water and sewer main extensions. So there's a significant investment that this applicant is providing to the existing condition of Hermann Road. As I mentioned, Hermann Road is currently, it's a dirt road. I personally have driven on it. It's a dirt gravel road. It needs to be improved to be paved, and that's what this applicant is proposing. In terms of the loading design on this project, as I mentioned, there's 3 drive-in garage doors along the front of the building. And then there's 3 loading docks tucked away in the northwest portion of the site. Those loading docks are designed to accommodate WB67 trucks. It is contemplated that each of the 3 tenants would be able to use one of the 3 loading docks. A unique portion of the design here is that we do need to use Hermann Road to maneuver into the loading docks on the western portion of the site. So a WB67 truck would actually pull up to the far end of Hermann Road and back up into the site. I certainly understand that's not a common situation, but as I mentioned earlier, Hermann Road is a very, very limited roadway. It's a dead end very shortly after the site. There's very limited traffic on the site. And based on this 36,000 square foot warehouse, you're talking about a few tractor trailer trips a day, if that. It's a very limited amount of trucks. What we normally see on smaller developments like this is that these drive-in doors along the front of the building are used much more often for smaller vehicles, pickup trucks, small utility vehicles, passenger vehicles, things of that nature. The loading docks could also be used for smaller trucks as well, box trucks, WB40 trucks, and et cetera. There is a variance associated with the loading. However, on the western portion of the site, it's not required or permitted to be in the front yard. Technically, since we have a 55-foot front setback, we are technically in the front yard with that loading area. But we did our best to tuck this loading area back behind the building So you can't see it from the road. It has also been designed to prevent any trucks from actually staging on Herman Road. The truck would completely load within the site and then exit back onto Herman Road. We're not going to be impeding traffic on Herman Road during loading operations. In terms of grading and drainage, we are designing a stormwater system that does comply with township, county, SCD, and state codes. Has been designed with the recently adopted stormwater management rules in New Jersey, which were adopted in March of 2021. We are providing green infrastructure techniques. On this particular project, we're providing an above-ground 4-bay basin to provide water quality pre-treatment for the on-site impervious coverage areas. That 4-bay then discharges to the rear of the site to an above-ground small-scale infiltration basin, which again has been designed to meet state and local codes. From there, the stormwater management discharges at a controlled rate to the rear of the site in the wetland area, which is naturally the low point in the area. So we're collecting all the stormwater runoff from the building and the parking areas, discharging it to the stormwater facilities, discharging it away from Herman Road. So there's not going to be any negative impact to the site or surrounding areas. The grading on site, as I mentioned before, there's a steep slope. We're not disturbing, however, it is in the rear of the site. In order to tie into those existing grades, we do have to provide a number of retaining walls on the northern portion of the site and the eastern and western portions of the building. The ordinance does not permit retaining walls greater than 6 feet in height. There's some portions of the retaining walls that are just over 6 feet. They're about 8 feet in height. These retaining walls are required to tie into the existing grades, make the stormwater management work. And it is a condition that was approved by this board a few years ago with the previous application. There's also a number of other grading requirements that the ordinance contemplates as design waivers, where we cannot have more than 10% grades within 5 feet of a building. Technically, we have greater than 10% due to the retaining walls in close proximity. And then lawn areas are not permitted to be more than 25% slopes. We have a 33% slope, which is slightly greater than 25%, but it's well within engineering standards. In terms of utilities, we're providing electrical utilities from the existing utility poles along Herman Road. And as council mentioned just a minute ago, we are proposing about 1,900 linear feet of water and sewer main extensions. So that is a significant impact or a significant investment that this developer is providing to the site, not only to provide water and sewer service for the site, but it would also provide fire service and fire suppression to the site, as well as the opportunity to provide fire suppression and water and sewer service for all of the existing uses on Herman Road, should those private developers or private property owners decide to connect. We are in the process of getting approval for the water and sewer extension from your municipal utilities authority, and we'll certainly get the approvals from the OCUA as well as the NJDEP once we get approval from the MUA. In terms of landscaping, we're landscaping around the entirety of the site. As you can see on the exhibit, the rear of the site is being substantially replanted to reestablish that existing wooded condition beyond the limits of the basin. We are providing a total of 120 plantings on the site, which consists of 31 shade trees, 53 evergreen shrubs, and 32 deciduous shrubs. We did receive your board professional review letters. There were a number of landscape comments, which I would consider relatively minor in nature, and we have no problem addressing those comments. In terms of lighting, we're proposing a total of 8 new lighting fixtures, all of which will be LED lit, which is obviously the modern equivalent of the previous lighting that you might see on older sites. They're all mounted at 16 to 20 foot in height. The ordinance permits up to 30 feet or height of the building. So we're actually well below the maximum light height permitted. The light levels on the site have been designed to generally meet 0.5 foot candles, which is what we would recommend for safety and adequate lighting for a use of this nature. We do have a slight light spillage onto Herman Road. We did provide shielded lights on the western and eastern portions of the building, but we still have a little bit of a light spillage onto the Herman Road just to light the driveways and provide safe lighting into the site. So there is technically a variance required for light spillage onto Herman Road. Again, there really are no developments adjacent to us, so there's no negative impacts. There's no residents or other commercial uses in the area. This is a very similar design as the surrounding areas. In terms of signage, the signage package will be completely compliant. We're actually not proposing a freestanding sign due to the location of the site and how the building is located on the property. We don't think a monument sign would be required. If we did provide a monument sign, it would technically require a variance due to the setback requirement. So we're simply not providing a monument sign. However, we are providing an 80 square foot sign on the building, which does comply with the ordinance requirements. And then we are requesting a small site address sign that is simply just going to have the address on the property. It's 498 Hermann Road. That's only going to be used for 911 emergencies and things of that nature. Contemplating about 3 foot by 4 foot on that sign, which is a very small sign. And again, it's not for identification or advertisement. It's really only for emergency purposes to identify the site address. We took a look at the traffic on this property. It does not warrant a traffic impact statement. We're looking at trip generation on the site well below the threshold for a traffic impact statement. We're looking at trips in the range of 30 to 32 trips during the AM and PM peak hours, which is well less than the 100 trip generation that would be required to have a traffic impact statement. So out of that trips, we're looking at, 4 or 5 trucks during the peak hour, which includes small vans, not tractor trailers or anything like that, but just general truck traffic. And there will be no negative impact to the traffic in the surrounding areas.
Tom, before you go into responding to the professional review letters, I just want to make a couple of points. So there's a bulk variance relief that you've described to the board. You also described the intensity of the development as roughly 50% building coverage and 50% impervious coverage of what the ordinance contemplated. So we're not pushing the envelope for purposes of getting a greater intensity of use. You then pointed out that there are wetlands on the site and wetland buffers that are on our neighbor's property that encroach onto ours. Just from a planning perspective, point out that those environmental constraints have driven the building forward. Our client has reduced the intensity of the building that is permitted to that which fits. And the limited bulk variance relief that we're requesting is really an accommodation of this building on this site with those environmental constraints. If you can put that in some planner's language for the board.
Yeah, absolutely. As Mr. Pape just mentioned, we're constrained on this site due to the wetlands in the rear. We designed this site to provide an adequate parking area in front of the building. We're providing ordinance compliant parking size, as well as drive aisle size, as well as safety island size. So we're meeting the ordinance intent of what the parking area wants to look like in front of the site. What that does is it boxes us into this 36,000 square foot warehouse. As Mr. Pape mentioned, we're not overdeveloping the site. We're actually significantly underdeveloping the site based on ordinance requirements. You look at the surrounding uses and the surrounding zoning. This is a site that's certainly within the characteristics of the neighborhood. There'll be certainly no negative impacts to the surrounding area immediately around the site or in the general region. This is a small warehouse tucked away in the rear part of a dead-end Hermann Road, tucked away on the northern portion of the municipality. It's what the ordinance contemplates, and it certainly does not negatively impact the standards of the master plan or what the ordinance intends. And in fact, it enhances what the ordinance requires by attempting to build something that the ordinance permits on the site.
In a balancing test of detriments versus benefits, this applicant has offered to pave 28 feet wide, 2,000 linear feet of roadway, and extend water and sewer a similar distance at his cost and expense. If you could factor that into the balancing test of benefits to the municipality and any detriments that I think you don't see any detriments, but you just point out those benefits.
Yeah, the net benefit is that you have a perfectly paved public roadway. You have public service of water and sewer that's being extended along the entirety of Hermann Road up to this site. Almost 1,900 linear feet of public utilities are being constructed by this applicant, whereas simply if this project was not being built on this property, there's no utilities or pavement that would be done on this. So it's creating a substantial benefit to the public good by providing this development and those public utilities.
I'm going to ask, so prior to coming before the board, we received review letters from your professionals. We also received review letters from your police and fire departments. If you could just summarize the police report and the fire department's report on the proposed development.
Yep. The traffic safety report prepared by Police Officer Travisano did review the plans. He did comment on the fact that we're using Hermann Road to use tractor trailer deliveries to that loading area on the western portion of the site. He recognizes that fact, and he does confirm due to the limited number of trips that we see on Hermann Road, it will not be a detriment, and he actually supports the project. His letter was part of the application package. And then we also received a fire official letter from Mr. Stanley O'Brien. We did have some conversations with him. The original proposal was for, I believe, a 15-foot wide stabilized fire access lane on the western portion of the building. In conversation with him, we increased that to 18 feet wide, which is what you see on the plan here. So we have an 18-foot wide fire access lane on the western portion of the site here. It'll be grass pavers, so it'll look like grass, but it'll be stabilized and certainly strong enough for fire vehicles. And we also did provide the striping within the parking area that he requested.
The reports that were generated by the board's professionals, in particular, Mr. Klee's report, includes some technical revisions and corrections and recommendations. Have you had an opportunity to both review the report that was generated by Mr. Klee and discuss the report with Mr. Klee?
Yes, I did have the opportunity to read it on numerous occasions, and I did have a time to connect with Mr. Klee to talk about his comments. I agree with his comments, and I have no issue addressing them as conditions of approval should the board grant this approval tonight.
Mr. Mueller, I know that I interrupted you. Do you have further testimony from your notes you want to return to?
Just on the same page with the board planner, Mr. Peters, we also were able to connect. I reviewed his letter in great detail, and I also have no issue addressing his technical comments as part of conditions of approval here. But other than that, that's really it. We do have outside agency approvals, which we're certainly in the process of obtaining. County Soil Conservation District, MUA for the water and sewer extension. Again, like I mentioned, we're not in Pinelands Commission territory, so we don't need approval from them. But we are in the process of obtaining all those approvals.
Just one last comment, kind of a segue from you to our architect. I do know that there were concerns that were brought to our attention prior to the meeting about the ability to properly and safely fight a fire. You pointed out that there's a fire lane, but our client also agreed to modify the construction methodology so that the exterior walls of this building are all masonry. This would not be a frame building. If you could just confirm that on the record, and I'll ask Mr. Collins to do the same.
Yes, the applicant has dedicated the building to be masonry, concrete tilt up walls, which would be fire suppression. And the entirety of the building will also have a fire suppression system itself, which will feed from that water that we're extending to the site.
Masonry walls, fire suppressed building.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, board members, I have nothing further on direct of Mr. Mueller. He is available to you and to your professionals at this time.
Yeah, the site has been redesigned. Correct.
Mr. Riker.
Let's grab a pad. The first thing I'm going to tell you is I'm looking at a letter that I penned in June. The Environmental Commission was looking for reports. Now, granted, the project was previously submitted, and I know what was approved and what wasn't. 5 months asking for an EIS. I'm going to put my position up for grabs here. If you're going to come here before the board and you have a letter that's 5 months old and you haven't responded to it, this might not be the place you want to be.
Yeah, I'm aware of that letter.
I'm aware of it too. 5 months. Inexcusable. Okay? I'm looking at this building again, and I'm going to beat Mr. Fleming to the punch. If I was going to seek an approval on this building, I would have looked at the past approval. So I'm going to run down the laundry list. Rear exits, fencing on top of berms that have significant elevation, fencing on top of retaining walls, access around the building for firefighting, access for ingress for firefighting. The front sidewalk is really nonsense. You're worried about car overhang. I'm worried about firefighters running back and forth. And I'm puzzled, if you had a car overhang on that little bit of sidewalk, how do you get ADA compliance? Getting by the car in the building on the sidewalk. And then I'm thinking, you're looking at 3 tenants. You should have at least 3 handicap parking spots. Okay, I don't see that. But I see you coming closer to the road and you're telling us this great story about, oh, it's, impervious coverage. I get it that there's wetlands. I get it. It's a corner lot. I get it's an odd shaped lot. But these little achievements that are supposed to be met aren't being met. And you're asking for a variance and you're looking for, 10,000 square feet more. I don't think the homework has been done. I think you should have looked at the previous approvals, gone down that laundry list, the work that these guys did, the work that the board did, because we went back and forth. I know Mr. Fleming dealt with it about the egress and whatnot. And I understand the building type construction, but that really doesn't make a difference. So you're coming to us with a lot of unfinished work, and here we are, it's 25 after 9. And we're telling you, and we're going to go one by one, of all the deficiencies that are in the design of this. Oh, by the way, you want to pave the road, great. But I'm not naive enough to believe that the water line doesn't benefit the rest of the tenants down there that are significant square footage. That's all I have to say. But I will tell you, I don't ever want to see 5 months latency on a response for a letter. I don't want to see it. It shouldn't happen. You respond to these gentlemen, 1, 2, 3. You have to respond to the Environmental Commission by ordinance. It's not a choice. It's not a negotiation. It's an ordinance. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell.
Have you considered putting solar panels on top of this structure?
We do have the architect coming up. I don't know the answer to that, so maybe the architect would better to answer
All
that
right,
one.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Part of my background is looking at the impacts of sewer infrastructure. And so I think the plan board needs to take a step back and look at the map, maybe even Google map. 35,000 square foot warehouse. The thought process is that there be a magnanimous gesture of paving street and sewer and water infrastructure. 35,000 square foot warehouse does not need sewer. So the question that comes to my mind is, what's the motivation behind the sewer, except to potentially pave the way for massive density of whatever building may be. That's a policy goal, that's a master plan, that's contemplated that way. It's a different story. The governing body, the planning board. But you don't need a sewer line. You do a package plan, otherwise address those relatively small manufacturing, a warehouse facility. But as a planner, I'm shocked that I'm not hearing an acknowledgement of the massive density that can be propelled by the sewer line that is being suggested done here. So I think there should be some type of density study in that area, because you have not many areas of green space, light manufacturing, maybe quite crazily long. So I just wanted to share that, to not look seriously at the sewer issue. Maybe ask the developer if he's interested in foregoing that cost, because apparently it's a cost, right? I think that there are other density plays in consideration here. I think it's sort of betting to understand whether that's a fair comment by me or not a fair comment. But whether it's our planner or otherwise, density build out study or density assessment, I think is critical to understand what's at play with this application. I'm not a planner, but that you need a sewer line, expensive sewer line for 35,000 per house. That's not plausible.
I agree with you. It seems a little far-fetched. Well, Mr. Clee, could you tell me, is it okay, is it normal practice for a plan to be submitted for tractor trailers to use a public road to pull out and then back into a loading dock? Is that?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. That's not normal. It must all be done on.
Typically, it's all,
property itself,
typically, it's all
right?
done within the property, yes.
Any response to any of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the comments. Just going to the environmental impact statement question, I absolutely agree that it should be submitted to the environmental committee. I personally did not receive the letter until this week. We did prepare an EIS, which was submitted as part of the application. I do understand the board engineer and planner reviewed it, but I'd be happy to work with the environmental commission to go over my report in great detail. It was not our intent to ignore that letter by any means. So I apologize for that misunderstanding. And then a lot of the other comments, not sure if we want to go through each one of them, but things like rear exits, I could work with the architect to make sure we could accommodate rear exits. I'd be more than happy to provide fencing and safety protection on top of all of the retaining walls where there's a concern with safety in those areas. The overhang comment regarding the sidewalks, ADA compliance requires a minimum of 3-foot width. We have 5 feet of sidewalk. So if we had a 2-foot overhang with certain cars, we still would have that 3-foot clearance. So it would still be ADA compliant. I would be more than happy to provide 3 handicap parking stalls on this property. I agree, three tenants would warrant perhaps 3 ADA stalls. Even though federal regulation is only 2, I don't see any issue with providing 3 handicap parking stalls. Regarding the sewer, I think the factor is that the water needs to be extended to this site to provide fire suppression to the building. That's really what it comes down to. We're improving Hermann Road and extending that water to the site. We're adding the sewer to that extension at the same time. There is a perpetual maintenance issue going on with septic systems. In almost any case that in my professional experience, you almost always wanted to connect sewer to a site, even if it was a very limited sewer demand. It's just the better engineering and better overall situation for sewer on the site, where we go out of our way very frequently to not do septic because of the issues associated with maintenance and constant ongoing reconstruction of these things. It's not my understanding that there's any ill intent in extending sewer here to maximize density. This is the only project I'm personally involved in. The site and surrounding area is significantly impacted by wetlands. So I'd be very surprised if there were any major developments in this area that would, create a density issue in the area. I think that covered most of the comments. I'd be happy to go over that in any more detail if you like.
The tractor trailers using the public road to back up into your loading docks?
Yeah.
Have you ever done any other project?
Yes, I have personally done it on other projects very similar to this. I designed one in Franklin Township that was designed and built in operations, working very well. This is probably even a better situation than that particular example because Hermann Road is a dead end. There's only a handful of other uses beyond the site. We're looking at very, very limited tractor trailer deliveries on the site and offloading on the site. We did design the driveway to be as far west as possible too, just to keep it away from that turn on Hermann Road, just so that the truck is well beyond any issues associated with trucks in that area. And it's my professional opinion that I certainly acknowledge the fact that it's unique, but I don't have any issues personally with the circulation of this area. Sure.
What's your budget estimate for the sewer line?
If I had to guess on without having it in front of me, it's on the order of $400,000 or $500,000.
About $500,000?
Yeah.
And you referenced the constant, like, exactly, you said, constant. Rebuild septic system. I'm not familiar with the concept of rebuild septic system. Typical life cycle of septic system. Is significant. So can you expand on the constant, and I don't want to rephrase what you said, that you have to constantly in the context of 35,000 perhaps.
Yeah, it's what I intended to say was that's a constant maintenance issue where you have to clean the septic systems, pump them if they go dormant or vacant. If this property is not occupied, for instance, they could be damaged and maybe need to be rebuilt. So it's just an ongoing maintenance issue that has to be maintained in perpetuity, essentially. Whereas the public sewer would just convey the sewage out to the public system. It's less of a burden for the property and the surrounding areas.
Financial burden because you have a sewer bill, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm just trying to get into actually how this topic of sewers and as it's $500,000 spent. Are you interested, in doing water fire suppression, like saving $500,000?
I would have to discuss that with the applicant, but the water and sewer is about 500,000 together.
There's an efficiency of putting them in together.
Anyone else? No? All right, at this time, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Have you concluded your testimony? You still have-
It's the direct testimony of the engineer is concluded, Mr. Chair. Mr. Collins, our architect, is here to testify.
Okay, maybe we should hold that public comment. Maybe you should bring up your architect, have him present his.
We're ready. Thank you. The architect for the building is David Collins. He could be sworn. We'll then share with you his credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Collins, for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you give us kindly your full name, spell your last and your affiliation, please, and through the chairman, your credentials?
David Collins, Collins, Phelps Collins Architecture, I'm the principal.
There you go.
Okay, I'm a principal with Phelps Collins Architecture in Lincroft, New Jersey. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, hold a bachelor degree of architecture from Roger Williams University and CARB certificate holder. I've been practicing for 14 years, licensed 14 years, testified under, testified in front of many boards all across the state. I'm also licensed in New York.
Thank you. We accept your credentials.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins, I'm going to ask if you could first identify the exhibit from which you'll be working. We'll make certain that it is properly labeled. And then I'll ask if you could take us through the facade treatment of the building and the proposed footprint and floor plan of the building?
Certainly, this first exhibit is sheet A2.01 of the architectural drawings. I believe we're up to A3.
Yes.
And my second exhibit is the exterior elevations, sheet A1.01, which I'll label as A4. As previously testified, we're proposing just under a 36,000 square foot warehouse. This is a speculative build. We don't have tenants identified specifically yet. As such, we're trying to make the building flexible. So the previous testimony, we're proposing basically 3 tenant spaces, a larger tenant space to the left, a center tenant space, and a right tenant space. Sorry, these plans are orientated north, same as the site plan. North is up, Hermann Road is to the south. So these will have a small office component and bathroom associated with them. And what we've tried to do is create a common raised loading dock that all could be shared with all tenants. And we've also created egress instead of out the back, which we can discuss. We created fire corridors that lead out to the left and to the right of the building for a second means of egress from the building. We did this purposely because directly behind is the basin for the building. And I didn't want to egress anybody to the back and entrap them into a basin. So my professional opinion was we were better off building that corridor if the building is occupied by multiple tenants, so that, you know, each occupant or each tenant space has multiple ways to egress the building. Across the front of the building, we have 3 loading doors that are at grade. So again, small trucks could load into this building, or the loading docks can be used in that raised dock area so that larger trucks can be brought into the building and unloaded. Switching to exhibit A4. The original proposal was to do a pre-engineered steel building where the bottom portion of the building was masonry and the top portion was steel. As earlier testified, we are willing to change this to an all concrete building. The advantages to an all concrete building is that we do get a natural fire rating out of those exterior walls. So the walls would have essentially a 2-hour fire rating, which for fire people coming to the building affords them some protection. The apparatus can have a little bit of separation between, trying to fight the fire and what's going on inside the building. So that would be a positive aspect. Again, the 3 loading docks are shown here on the left, and we're showing entry canopies over the 2 entryways. We also do have some side windows bringing in some natural light into the warehouse spaces. If the board feels that they would want these to be all concrete, we can eliminate these, or we can move them to the front if that's what they want. But that's what these windows are shown here. We also show the topography on the back of the building. So my finger is basically at the finished floor level. So you can see the difference in grade in the back where this drops down into the basin area. So this really was the reason that we didn't put egress, but we can put egress doors here, and someone coming out of this egress door would have to circulate back up the ramp and out through the front. You can see that slope pretty nicely here on this east elevation, how the site starts to drop off in the back. Again, this is the side exit door that we proposed purposely so that it was at grade. So we are proposing a building that is just over 40 feet tall, where 50 feet is allowed in the zone. So we showed the maximum allowed building height here, and you can see that we're below that maximum building height. We are proposing 1 wall sign, which we can definitely detail out and work with professionals if the board sees favorably on the application. And we will meet all the sign requirements. And as testified by Mr. Mueller, we want to have an identification sign, which we can also add to this exterior elevation. Oh, solar. So our building does slightly sloped to the back, and we did this purposely to hide the roof assembly from the street. So we parapeted 3 sides of this, and it's sloping down. So unfortunately, it's sloping down towards the north, which is not good for solar. But we are willing to put solar on the building. We'll have to put it, up on stanchions and tilt it back towards the south, but we will put solar on the building. So I just want to add a little bit to some of the discussion we're having. When we looked at this building and the viability of this project, we investigate, well, let me start by saying that we need water at the building. We have to have suppression. For this size building and for this use, we need sprinkler system in this building or it won't work. So we initially investigated putting a large water tank on the site so that we could pump into that tank, have a reserve water on site and use that in the case of an emergency to fight a fire. When we looked at the general cost of putting that tank in and putting a septic system in and weighed that against the additional benefit of trying to bring these utilities in from East Commodore, that's when we decided that that was a better solution than having a tank on site and a septic system on site. So we did look at those 2 options, just so the board knows.
That concludes your.
Yes.
That concludes Mr. Collins' direct testimony, and he is available to the board and board's professionals for examination.
Okay. Anybody have any questions up here? Yeah. Mr. Collins, it would be awesome if we had these plans before the meeting. We're all sitting here thumbing around looking for the architectural plans. It's not your fault as the architect, but my comments regarding egress and everything that's going to follow coming out of Mr. Fleming's mouth have to do with egress. That's his job. I just tee it up and go with it. So what you're saying is, and I'm going to go back, I understand the use of the building, but you could have constructed a building out of steel. No one's stopping you. It still meets the use, I believe, under what the ordinance allows. The previous building, okay, I understand the sewer thing. It's your prerogative. But the previous building was sprinkler. It worked. And just because now you're bringing a pipe down a road, for water coming in and effluent going out, in my opinion, it doesn't justify the increase in the size because of everything else that's going on. So I'm just going to be clear on the record that you could have built this building out of steel. We're not asking you to build it out of concrete. It is nice that you're building it out of concrete. And I would guess that the next conversation is going to be about parking a fire truck so close to a building during a structure fire. But I'll yield to Mr. Fleming on that. But just to touch, if you had these plans submitted, we would save a lot of time. We could look at, as sharp as my eyes are at 2015, I can't read that plan.
These plans were submitted in January.
We don't have them.
I have the receipt for them. So I don't know what happened. February 17th, 2021, I misspoke. The architectural plans were submitted with everything else. I certainly understand your frustration, but we'll file. I'll make certain that there's additional copies that are delivered.
All right, so you do agree with my assessment that the building could be constructed out of steel. You do agree with the previous approval that you had a sprinkler system that did work, and you did have a septic system that did work.
I wasn't part of the previous application. They may have been
but-
able to make that
But
work. I don't know.
it is in resolution that you had a project that worked. My continuing issue, and if you follow my conversations with other applicants, when I drive down Main Street, I want to look and I want to see facades in linear fashion of sunsets.
And I happen to know this road for a lot of different reasons. And I can tell you, the next property adjacent to this is a piece of junk, but the building sits in the back and the garbage sits in the front. And then when I get to the next building after that, which I believe is the Gunite Company, that sits even further back. And then there's another building, which I'm not sure the use of, which is Tilt Up Construction, I believe, has 35 or 40-foot walls. And that sits even further back. But yet when I come down the road and the first thing I'm looking at is your frontage is in my opinion, almost in the right of way. And I didn't like it then, and I certainly don't agree with it now. It's just, it's too much. It's too much in your face. And quite honestly, you have not presented as a group an overall justification that it's a public benefit. The sewer is yours, the water is yours. Great, we're going to get a little bit of road at it, but I would tend to ask, Mr. Wall on a 5-year plan when that road would get paved, and he would probably have an answer for me. So I don't see anything great happening here. I don't see any sidewalks. I don't see any curb, which are the things that I asked for on the last project. But we're getting a larger building, and by the way, it's a third bigger just because we have pipe. Doesn't work. I'll yield to Mr. Fleming.
Referring to Exhibit A2, the basin is directly behind the building. Directly. Yeah, it shares the wall, 0 feet. It's right there. I'm going to estimate that it's about 4 to 5 feet down lower than the finished floor. Now, the wall height, though, is also lower there, but there is about a 4 to 5 foot difference between the finished floor and where the basin hits the building.
Looking at your plan, how do they share the load? They want to share the load about all 3 tenants.
Yeah, so as I said, this is speculative. We don't know that there will be 3 tenants. There may be 1 tenant. They'll have to be, we will have to design away from this. We may have to widen this corridor depending on what tenants we get. We could widen this and we can make a shared access from this location here. That's part of the internal layout that we'll have to work out for sure. We just don't know how to work it out now because we don't know the tenants yet. No mezzanines are proposed.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone else? Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Collins, you had talked about the need for fire suppression for the building. What's the use group that this building is going to be designed for?
S1 and F1 use.
I'm sorry?
F1 and S1 use. So that's moderate hazard factory use and moderate hazard storage use.
Thank you. With regards to the loading docks, and I don't know if this is you or the site civil, you show on your plans that the loading dock's 4 foot off the ground. And it appears from the grading plan that the grading outside the building's at grade. So is the loading dock going to slope inside the building?
Looking at Exhibit A3, this portion, this box here is finished floor is raised 4 feet higher than the rest of the building.
Mhm.
So as the truck backs up on grade, it will be at the proper height to unload at 4 feet. And then there's a lift to unload to grade level inside the
So
building.
the change in grade will occur interior. to the
It's all interior.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, at this time, do you have any other witnesses for this evening?
There are no additional witnesses this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to public comment. If anyone cares to comment about this application, please step up to the microphone. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board and through the chairman will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I will.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last and your address, please?
Edward Bannon, BANNON, 22 Abercorn Court, Jackson. Just a question to the front of the building. You would propose 2 handicap spots way off to the left. Why were not 1 handicap spot at least proposed for each entry across the front?
The applicant, the engineer indicated that he will add 3 and distribute them across the front of the building.
Add 3 additional at each?
Total of 3.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Right? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Where do we go from here? Mr. Pape?
Sure. Mr. Chair, may I ask for a 5-minute recess to confer with my client and his engineer? We'll be back promptly.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wall's not here. Really? Would you mind, would somebody mind? Here he comes. Okay, Mr. Pape.
Yes, Mr. Chair, board members, we respectfully request that this application be carried to a future meeting. What we will do is deliver the environmental impact reports to the Environmental Commission. We'll make certain that additional architectural plans are made available to all the board members. We'll meet with your professionals again to address their concerns, and most likely we'll have a resubmission of those plans. We've also memorialized your comments, the board's comments that were shared with us this evening, and we will do what we can to address those before asking the board to consider the public hearing. So if that is an acceptable procedure to the board, that is the way we would request to proceed.
Mr. Pape, I think that's wonderful suggestion. I really do. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but I think that's a step in the right direction to conclude this. So, how long do you think it will take you?
But delivering the paperwork is something we're going to have accomplished before the week is out, and meeting with your professionals. I think we just have to be mindful that we're about to go into the holiday season.
Yes.
So with Mr.
I was going to suggest March 17th.
So my engineer and architect indicate that we're talking about February when we would be able to make resubmission. So we would ask for you to carry us to a meeting after February so that we can make a meaningful revision and resubmission.
How about we have a March 21st meeting?
That's available to the board. It's available to your applicants, professionals. We would accept that.
Okay. May I have a motion
Well,
to?
if I may, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. So you're going to waive time through
March 21st.
through April 18th. And I guess at this point, as it's the first adjournment, we would not require you to make provide further notice. However, if you change the plans, you may well have to renotice, depending on what you're doing.
So on the record, the applicant does hereby grant an extension of time for the board to complete their deliberations and take formal action through April 18th, 2022. We appreciate that there's no renotice or republication, and we acknowledge that if the plans change, the trigger an amendment to the request for relief, that there would be a republication and renotice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to carry this until, this is block 2301, lot 10, Hermann Road, carried until our March 21st, 2022. Wow, meeting. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good night, Paul.
Quicker than I hear a motion. Do I get a second?